Chargers. Touchdown, UCLA.
With USC great and NFL stud, Frosty Rucker.
The Trojans back in front.
And LAFB founder Ryan Dyrud on the Believe Podcast Network and LAFBnetwork.com. This is your destination for Los Angeles football.
What's going on, Los Angeles, and welcome to the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network, always on the Believe Podcast Network as well. We are everywhere you get your podcasts, on YouTube at LAFB Network. The website, LAFBnetwork.com, is where you can find everything you need, plus plenty of written articles and a lot of other social content, engaging content, a lot of stuff. LAFBnetwork.com is the place where you want to go. What's up? How's everyone doing? My name is Ryan Dyrud. I'm your host of the show. If it's the first time you are joining, we talk all things LA football, Rams, Chargers, Trojans, Bruins. Excited that you're joining us today. So thanks for tuning in. Got a good show today. If you tuned in last Friday, we really dove into the Chargers and how they rank in the AFC West. There's a lot of conversation about who is the best team in the AFC West, right? With all of the movement there, with the addition of Russell Wilson, with Devontae Adams going to the Raiders, with Tyreek Hill leaving the Chiefs, with everything the Chargers have done, Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson and whatnot. Who is the top team right now heading into 2022? So I dove in and went position by position, Chargers versus the AFC West. So if you're a Chargers fan, you can check that out if you missed it. Today, we're going to focus on the Rams in the NFC West. A lot of movement in the NFC West as well. The loss of Russell Wilson, as mentioned. The confusion in San Francisco. Is Debo going to get traded? Who's starting at quarterback? The contention in Arizona. Kyler's not happy with his contract. DeAndre Hopkins suspended the first 6 games. Von Miller leaves the Rams, but the Rams are still the status quo of the NFC West. So we're going to get into exactly where they stack up position by position first, the rest of the NFC West. My guy, Nikko from the NFL Sapient, is going to join me. You don't just have to listen to me talk for an hour. We can kind of go back and forth, give some thoughts, takes, opinions, and have a lot of fun with it. So today's show, as always, brought to you by our friends at Bet Online. If you're a betting fan, which a lot of people are, and you live anywhere, doesn't matter, head to betonline.ag, mobile or desktop. Use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV. You get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Deposit $100, you get 50 free dollars. Free money. Can't go wrong. NBA playoffs. I mean, who do you like? The Warriors. No more Ja Morant, so probably not going to be betting on Memphis, but hey, I'm sure they have good odds. Miami Heat. You still got Giannis and the Bucks. As you can tell, I don't pay a ton of attention to basketball. I'm more about hockey. If you want to bet on hockey, my Avalanche swept the first round, waiting on their opponent, either the Blues or the Wild. You got all the other series that are a lot of fun. So the hockey is actually a lot of fun to bet on, because if you want to do it, let me just give you, I'm not a betting expert by any means, so I don't want to call this advice, but let me just give you what I do. If you look at the playoffs in hockey and you want to win easy money, you look at the stars for all the teams, and usually there's a bet you can put on over-under point total per game. And obviously some stars have higher, but a lot of the stars are in that 1.5 to 2.5 point total range per game. So, a goal and an assist, or a goal or an assist counts as a point. Well, if you look, I mean, Nathan McKinnon or Cam McCall on the Avs have gotten like 2+ points every single game of the playoffs so far. Sidney Crosby, multiple points every single game so far. Connor McDavid, multiple points pretty much every game. So look for those, because those are kind of the more commonalities. Is look for the star players, what their point total over under is, and then usually you can bet on that. So do it at betonline.ag. Again, promo code BELIEVE, 50% welcome bonus in your first deposit. Win some money. Why not? Have some fun with it. So that's that. Thank you all for tuning in. Like I said, this is the LA Football Show. Let's get right into it, because we have a long, fun conversation about our Super Bowl champion Rams. Let's get after it. All right, Rams fans, as mentioned in the intro, excited to welcome on the next guest of the LA Football Show, talking all thing Rams as we go a deep dive into the NFC West and kind of how the Rams stack up and finish. But my man Nikko, you can follow him at Football by Nikko. He writes and contributes to NFL Sapient. Brother, what's up? Thanks for joining the show. How you doing?
How's it going? I'm doing good.
Good, man. Well, yeah, thanks for jumping on and talking Rams. Before we kind of get into the division, though, just curious your take on this Rams draft. How do you think they pulled it off? You know, we were in Vegas, and I spoke very highly on it. I thought for not having a pick till the third round, I liked what they did and the positions of value they got and kind of how they were able to fill out their roster. But what was your take on it? How'd you feel about the draft?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty solid draft. I know most of the draft analysts were giving it like D and Fs, but I thought, for the way that they draft and some of the players that they have to have, I think it was a pretty good draft. They filled some holes at guard and corner and running back in their first three picks. And just they're trying to find some more of those playmakers to kind of fill around the roster and back up the stars.
Yeah, I don't know how anyone gave them a grade that low unless they were just basing on not having a first round pick, because I think the talent they got at the level which they got and the positions of need that they filled, I thought they knocked out of the park. I mean, in recent years, I feel like the Rams have always kind of drafted with me scratching my head, and then they make it work and they develop players well, and they end up being like, oh, wow, that pick worked out great. But at the time, it's always like, interesting. But this was the first year I was like, no, every pick made sense. Like every down the line, I was like, great. Bruss is a great fit. Could literally start day one if we need to at guard. Kyron Williams, I love that pick for a running back when there's really not a lot of clarity at that position with injuries and Darrell Henderson in his final year. And you can go down the line. Who's your favorite pick? Put you on the spot. Who is the favorite pick of the 2022 draft for the Rams?
I might be a little biased since I also have been covering UCLA, but I really like Quentin Lake. I know he was a really solid tackler. He fills the need, in safety depth. They do like their safeties in the later rounds of the draft. I think it'll be really exciting to watch him develop as, maybe he'll get some starting time in his rookie year.
Yep. Yeah. Big play Lake, as we call him here at the LA Football Network. We had him on our Bruin Bible show before the draft. Awesome kid. So we are thrilled he's staying in LA. We were doing our live stream during the draft and all like cheered when it was announced that Q is staying here in LA. So I love that pick. For those that don't remember, Jordan Fuller was taken in the 6th round just 2 years prior out of Ohio State. And now Quentin Lake, another safety taken in the 6th round that could for sure have great value in the special teams, but could definitely come in and get some situational play at actual safety or nickel. But also, if God forbid injuries stack up, we don't have to sign anyone off the streets like we did with Eric Weddle, although that worked out, but at least now we'll have some more depth there. So what'd you love about Q? I saw you in the press box at UCLA, so I know you covered the team, but what'd you love most about him during his time with the Bruins?
I thought he was just a very intelligent guy. I know they moved him around a lot, and it's just, I think that's something that probably attracted the Rams to him, which is the fact that he could kind of play anywhere and be kind of a versatile defender was the main thing.
Yeah, extremely versatile, I think, which is why I loved him. And like I said, when the Bruins needed a big play, because it was not a very good defense, as we all know, had some good players. I mean, the Bruins had 6 players drafted. Tito Abonia also staying in LA, going to the Chargers on the defensive line. But as a unit, and a lot of that we can put blame, I'm sure, as many would, on Jerry Azzinaro, the defensive coordinator, who's no longer there, much to the praise of many Bruins fans. But individually, they had a lot of good players, and Quentin Lake was probably the best in that unit. And whenever they needed a play, specifically, we can look back at the LSU game. We can look back at some other big-time moments when he made the big play that had to happen, that sprung, getting the defense off the field, put the offense back, and let DTR and Kyle Phillips and Charbonnet go to work. So, I love Quentin Lake. I love that he is staying in LA. We actually, I've teased this before, and I won't tell you too much, Nikko, but we have some stuff in the works for Q here at LA Football, which I think we're extremely excited about and should be a lot of fun. Last thing about UCLA, Nikko, before I move back to the Rams and go to the division, I recently saw, and it was probably a fan list. I don't know if it wasn't done by like ESPN or anything. Not that I give them more credit than fans, because I don't think they know what they're talking about a lot anyway. But it was basically the top 25 Heisman favorites, and it wasn't like a bet online. It wasn't like a betting site. It was just like a blog created it. On that list, I think they had DTR at like 14. Did not have Zach Charbonnet anywhere on it.
Yeah.
Are you as big of a Charbonnet guy as we are here?
Yeah, I think that's a little strange considering he lost a lot of his playmakers to the draft, and you lost Dulcich, Britton Brown, Kyle Phillips. So I'm not sure how that would make sense as as much as Charbonnet did. I know he's a very powerful runner. I know when I first saw him, I started covering the team this past season. When I first started watching him, reminded me a lot of like almost Jonathan Taylor, James Robinson, just kind of one of those guys that can just like power through defenders.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like a Jamal Lewis feel if you want to go way back in NFL days, one of the 2000, the 2K club, Jamal Lewis. But I love DTR. I think DTR is going to have a great year. I think being a fifth-year starter is so rare in college football. And I love some of the transfer they got in. Specifically, I love Bobo transferring in from Duke, and they got I'm drawing a blank on his name, a kid from Central Florida that played with Dylan Gabriel, who had transferred here but now left. So I think they've gotten some good weapons around him. You still can't replace a Dulcich, a Kyle Phillips, but I do like his ceiling. But to me, Zach Charbonnet could be a top running back, period. And if you're the top running back in the nation, you probably have some good Heisman odds. So I was just shocked by that. Just shows, I think, that whoever made that poll, I don't remember who it is, and I don't want to call him out, but probably doesn't watch a lot of West Coast football.
Yeah, I think that obviously quarterbacks are going to have a higher pull on it too, just similar to like an MVP in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fair. I mean, that always is the case. So, and it's so hard for a running back unless you have a year like Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey had in the same year, of course. Like if they would have done that separately, they probably each could have won the Heisman. But of course, they did the same year, so you can only pick one. But unless you're doing that, where you're breaking 2,000 yards or 3,000 all-purpose yards like CMC did, it's really hard for a running back to get in that conversation. But anyway, to the Rams, for all the Rams faithful out there. So I want to go, if you listened last week, I focused on the Chargers in the AFC West, and we kind of stacked up where each position, how they compare to each team. And it kind of can give us a better sense of where the teams will finish because, predictions are all hypothetical. We're just sitting here behind a microphone predicting how the season's going to go. So it's not factual or that, but I think we can get a good idea if we look positionally and compare. So, Nikko, we're going to kind of go through team by team here, get your takes on it. Last time was just me talking for an hour, so it'll be nice having someone else to bounce it off of. But quickly, and we'll start defense and go to offense when we go through each team. So let's quickly go through the Rams just roster or depth chart that we think is going to be the case. And that way we don't have to spend a ton of time talking about them. When we go to each team, we can just kind of compare. So starting at defense, let's start out the defensive line. And, at this point, I would say it's fairly safe to say the starting three are Ashawn Robinson, Greg Gaines, and obviously Hall of Famer Aaron Donald. So overall, just kind of how do you feel about that unit as a starting, 3 and a 3-4 base defense?
Yeah, I think it's a great unit. I know they lost Sebastian Joseph Day, but Greg Gaines was doing a very, very good job replacing him for the rest of the season and throughout the Super Bowl run. So I think they're pretty much set there. I'm definitely excited to watch Bobby Brown and some of their draft picks play at that spot too, because I know they like to have a good rotation in and out of the defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, that's, always I give so much credit to Coach Henderson about what he does for that unit. And, Sebastian Joseph Day, love Sebastian Joseph Day. Again, covering both teams. I'm ecstatic that he stayed in LA and goes to the Chargers and doesn't go elsewhere, as he'll be instrumental on that defensive line that was so bad last year. I think he'll really do well. But I think Greg Gaines just, got him out of a job. Greg Gaines played so good last year coming in. And when you have depth like a Bobby Brown III that I know fans don't know a lot about, and because we didn't see him much just because he wasn't needed, but I know the staff is extremely excited about this kid out of Texas A&M. I talked to Coach Henderson right after the draft pick last year, and he was just over the moon for him. Kind of said he wasn't comparing him to Aaron Donald, but said he has a play style similar to what Aaron Donald brings, which should get fans very excited. And then you also have, Marquise Copeland, who had some playing time. They also have Ernest Brown IV, who was like a practice squad member. So they have great depth that they can really rotate in and out. So I think it's a very strong unit. Probably anytime you have Aaron Donald in that unit, it's going to be top one of the tops in the league, regardless of who else is there. But they really rounded out. And Ashawn Robinson, who we didn't even talk about, really came on strong last year in run defense and really shoring up that edge. So, I mean, I just think it's a really good unit. So, Nikko, looking at our edges, this is probably the biggest area remaining of concern, I would say, because of what they were able to do at corner and what they were able to do at inside. And that's because you lose a Von Miller. And obviously you have Leonard Floyd, who's the incumbent, who's very, very good. But after that, it's kind of a lot of unknown. Justin Hollins played great last year till he got injured. You have Terrell Lewis, who really has never been able to stay healthy. Chris Garrett, the late round draft pick last year. You get, some more rookies in this year. What's your thoughts overall on this kind of edge unit heading into the season?
Yeah, I think like you said, the edge unit is a little bit more of a question mark on defense, and it's one of those positions that we kind of don't know in case, someone gets hurt, who can really step up. I know we've seen a little bit of Terrell Lewis, hasn't been, 100% impressive, but I think that as the season goes on, we might see, Chris Garrett rotating in, Daniel Hardy maybe rotating in, and just I think they want to see, who can be the next successor at this position.
Yeah, Justin Hollins looked great last year before he got hurt. He was, after being signed by the Rams, and he was playing a bit inside with the Broncos, and he moved back to the natural outside with the Rams. And then last year, I remember being at training camp, Nikko, and the thought was that, most likely it would be a Terrell Lewis or an Obo Okoronkwo, who was no longer with the team, but it was thought they would be kind of the starter alongside Floyd. And Hollins just killed it at training camp and stole that job away and really played well until he got hurt. And even before the Von Miller trade, if I'm not mistaken, the Rams actually led the league in sacks. Now, a lot of that, when you have Aaron Donald on the line, who doesn't count as an edge, that helps. But there's no replacing Von, but I think it's a unit that there's questions, but at least there's a high ceiling on it. And you mentioned Chris Garrett, who I am so excited to see how he can translate if that production from that small school, St. Paul Concordia, can transfer to the NFL level, because he's got the intangibles, he's got the speed, he does have the size. It's just a matter of now going up against premier talent on the edge. And if he can really translate that production, I mean, they're set with who they have. And Terrell Lewis, another guy who's super talented, that hopefully the guy can just stay healthy. So yeah, but an interesting unit that I think we'll have some fun comparisons to the other teams when we get to there. Inside backer, we can go kind of quick on this. Ernest Jones and Bobby Wagner. I won't say anything else. Let you speak on it. How do you feel about those two?
Yeah, I think the Bobby Wagner signing was huge. They haven't really had a big presence on the inside since Corey Littleton left, and I think it'll be great for not only the defense but also for Ernest Jones. He's learning. He's a young linebacker. He had a pretty solid rookie season, even though might not get recognized as much as some of the other guys on defense. But I think that they need a big guy in the middle just to kind of help with that run defense and with the missed tackles, and I think Bobby Wagner will do that for them.
Yeah, I mean, huge signing. I know it's different positions, but when you miss out on Von Miller, they had to make a big signing on defense, and Bobby Wagner was that. Again, doesn't play the same position as Von Miller, but at least adds some more versatility to the position. The dude's an all-pro, isn't in the Pro Bowl every single year. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. I think he still might be the best middle linebacker in all of football, even at the age of, I think he's only 30 or 31. So it's not like the dude's super old. But Ernest Jones was such a surprise last year. I was very high on him when he was drafted out of South Carolina. I know it was kind of mixed emotions about him. But once he kind of got in before the injury, he looked great. And then even coming out after the injury, I think there's a lot of excitement around Jones. I know the Rams love him. And, I know they run a lot of one backer sets, so they're going to be bummed to take him off the field, but they're in very good hands with, I think, both those two in the middle. Now looking at the secondary, obviously Jalen Ramsey, and they just brought back in a trade, which was such an underrated trade, I think, getting Troy Hill back. He's their slot corner. So I think if you're starting two outside guys, if say we're talking about base starting, I would think Robert Rochelle or David Long as your starter on the outside, but Troy Hill is just instrumental in the nickel or the slot they really didn't have last year. And then at safety, Jordan Fuller will be your incumbent back again once he'll be healthy with the green dot most likely. Some people think Taylor Rapp will be alongside him. I personally think Nick Scott stole that job away with how well he played in the playoffs. So you could debate either way, but I think it's Scott. What's your thought though on the overall starting secondary we got?
Yeah, I think this is a very young group. Obviously, you got a bunch of the draft picks, Robert Rochelle, David Long. They're pretty young and they were pretty unexperienced, but I think that as the season goes on, you'll see like who kind of steals the role almost.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Robert Rochelle didn't have a great rookie season last year, but he was pretty solid in some of the games. The Giants game was kind of iffy, but I think that as they learn more from, the veteran presence like Troy Hill, I think they can be better.
Yeah, and Robert Rochelle I'm excited about because we knew there was going to be a learning curve coming from, I think it was like Central Arkansas, some small school. And so we knew there was going to be definitely some growing pains, and we saw those growing pains, but we also saw the flash of athleticism, which is why the Rams were so high on him. So I'm really excited about seeing his year 2 development. And, so much of playing any position in NFL is just learning the scheme and system. And when you're drafted and then thrown into it in training camp, it takes a long time to learn it. Now he's had a full season playing in it, plus a full off season learning it. So I think we'll see his progression very well. And then obviously getting Hill back was just huge. And I really liked the draft pick. They got another small school kid out of South Carolina State, who I like that pick a lot as well. And that'll be fun to see kind of where he fits in and how he does. Russ Yeast they got a lot of fun draft picks to be able to play with. But I think you're sitting well with Jalen Ramsey and then getting Troy Hill back, I think really answer a lot of questions when that was a concern, I think, for a lot of people after losing Darius Williams. But I think they sure that up by getting that back. So Nikko, shooting over to offense, and we'll go a little quicker through here because there's a lot more incumbents. Stafford, we don't need to talk much about him. Where do you have Stafford ranked in the NFL heading into this year among quarterbacks?
I would definitely say around the 8 to 10 range. Above guys like Matt Ryan for sure, and I would say he's around 9 or 10 for me because sometimes he can be really great, sometimes he can be really inconsistent. So I think there's definitely guys that are better than him, but if he can improve this year with Allen Robinson, I think he can knock him up to maybe 6 or 7.
Yeah, I think it's top 10 for sure. There's sometimes I want to put him top 5. Maybe that's the bias in me. The arm talent is top 5, no doubt about it. Sometimes the decision making isn't quite there just because he trusts that arm talent a little too much. But yeah, Matthew Stafford, great. He's a Super Bowl champion now. He can get that monkey off his back. He won, 4 straight playoff games, bringing his record to 4-3 overall. So love Matt. Love that he's becoming a hometown favorite too after what he was able to do. Running back, this is the real fun conversation. Cam Akers, I would say, is probably the incumbent. Darrell Henderson, again, if he can stay healthy, is a really fun change of pace back. Kyren Williams, I think, though, can really challenge to be like the true number one. What's your thoughts on the running back room?
Yeah, I think it's another young room. I mean, you got Darrell Henderson 2019, Cam Akers 2020, and then Williams 2021. So, or 2022, my bad. Or Jake Funk was last year. So you got one from each of the last 4 years they've drafted a running back. And I think that just kind of speaks to the injury history in that room. Because I don't think Henderson has ever played a full season during his tenure with the Rams.
Yep.
And just the fact that they kind of need a little bit more insurance at that position just goes to show you how they want to go into more of a committee this year. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them do a good rotation of at least Akers, Henderson, and Williams.
Yeah, and this is just my opinion. I'm not saying the Rams are listening to the LA Football Podcast or anything, but I think, in my opinion, you should just draft a running back every year. I've said it many times. It's nothing against the running back as people or what the position brings to the game, but unfortunately for them, when it comes to contracts and whatnot, it's just so easily replaceable, and it doesn't make a lot of sense financially to sign a running back to a big long-term contract. So if you're drafting a mid-range running back between the 4th and 6th round every single year, you just keep that stockpile going. You never have to overpay for one like the Rams unfortunately got into with Todd Gurley. And so, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if this is Darrell Henderson's last year as a Ram, and then you have Cam Akers, you have Jake Funk, you have Kyren Williams, and then next year draft another running back and just kind of keep the stable going. And the way the Rams do things kind of as a business, it makes sense to do that. And what I love about Kyren Williams is he's extremely good in pass protection, which was something Sony Michel was pretty good as well, who now is, I believe, on the Miami Dolphins. And so he can kind of step in and be that really good pass pro guy. But a great running back, comes from the, Notre Dame, so a very prestigious school in terms of running backs and whatnot. So I like what they've done there. And obviously, let's see how these guys stay healthy. Wide receivers, maybe one of the best units in all of football. We'll just say the top 3: Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson. 2 questions for you, Nikko. Your thoughts on moving on from Bobby Trees and your thoughts on the addition of Allen Robinson.
Yeah, I think that one was a hard decision for them to make. I know that they love Robert Woods. Everybody in the locker room probably loved Robert Woods as well. All of us fans love Robert Woods, so it was hard for them, I'm sure, to trade him to Tennessee. But it was definitely more of a business decision than, a personal one, because they needed that salary cap, flexibility. But speaking from a strictly football standpoint, Allen Robinson is better than Robert Woods, I think.
Yeah,
And
go ahead.
yeah, and then they definitely had a little bit of that depth at wide receiver. They drafted a couple in the last 2 years, and him joining Tennessee actually really helps their blocking, because I know he's a really good blocking guy, and Tennessee is more of a run team. So I think they found a really good spot for him and did him right, and they just brought in Allen Robinson just for the business side of it, which football is a business. So
Yeah, I talked a lot about it. It was, we have a Bobby Trees shirt here at LAFB. Like, I love, he went to USC, so he's like an LA legend. So super hard to see the person and player go. But from a, not even just business standpoint, which I agree with you, but even from a football standpoint, as good as Robert Woods is, and as important as he was to this team, not just on the field, but in the locker room and in the leadership aspect, his style of game is very similar to that of Cooper Kupp's, in the sense that they can both play all over. They're both very intelligent players. But they're great run blockers, but they're similar in size, similar in speed, similar in route concepts, which they can do it all. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but you get a guy like Allen Robinson that's very different. I mean, he's a jump ball guy. He's got bigger size. He can be more of a deep threat. So in reality, you just add another weapon to Matthew Stafford's arsenal they didn't have before. And so, as painful it was to see Woods go, I think Robinson, whether you want to debate if he's better than Woods or not, he just brings a different element that I think will be very utilized in this offense that they haven't had since that I can remember in a long time in that style of receiver. They just haven't really had that. So, yeah, tough to see, but I actually really like the Robinson signing, and it's going to be fun to see him actually have a quarterback be able to throw him the ball. So,
yeah, I think that additionally, he also gives Matthew Stafford that really like big kind of receiver that he likes, Kenny Galladay, Megatron. So it'll be interesting to see how they kind of gel together.
Yeah. And it's, if we're really getting technical, even before the Woods injury, there was never a true, I mean, I don't want to say chemistry because that makes it sound like it's a personal thing, but a true like on-field chemistry between Stafford and Woods. They could never really get on the same page. He'd have one game where he'd have a good statistic game, then he'd have 4 weeks of like one catch per game. And I think part of that was just the similarities between him and Kupp. And then part of that was just, Stafford's style of play and kind of needing a different style. And that's what Robinson will bring. So it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun to see how it really plays out. I'm glad they sent him to an AFC team that they wouldn't have to see except for maybe in the playoffs. I know they do play them this year also. But doesn't affect anything division or conference wise, so we can really root for him and hope for the best. Tight end wise, a position that was decimated by injuries, and they kind of are just running it back with the group they have, hoping we see a Jacob Harris ascension. Bryson Hopkins can continue to develop. Kendall Blanton was a young bright spot that kind of came out of nowhere, and Higbee, if he can just stay healthy, is real solid. What do you think of the tight ends?
Yeah, the tight ends is a pretty solid room. There's not really one like, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews level guy in there, but everyone's been pretty solid. They don't really use McVay does not really use his tight ends very much. I don't think one has ever passed, I think, like 50 targets in a season. So I know they like to use their tight ends in definitely a more intermediate passing games compared to some of the other teams. And I think that Higbee does a great job, especially in the red zone as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's a good unit overall. It's not the strength of the offense, but it's perfect in terms of how they utilize it within the scheme and complementary to like what the receivers and running backs do. So lastly, offensive line probably took the biggest hit in the offseason with the retirement of Andrew Whitworth and then the Austin Corbett leaving and signing elsewhere. So now you got Noteboom slotted to start at left tackle, Edwards at left guard, Brian Allen, who they re-signed at center. And then right guard, I would slot Logan Brusson right there. I know other probably people either have Coleman Shelton or even Bobby Evans in there. But I think Logan Bruss is going to end up getting that job, just a stalwart out of Wisconsin, which is just such a powerful, offensive line school. Played with David Edwards actually for a season or two, and then Rob Hamilton at right tackle. So what's your thoughts overall, Nikko, on the offensive line? Do you think they took a big step backward, or do you think they are able to stay somewhat, similar to where they were last year?
I think they took a little bit of a step backward. Obviously, losing Andrew Whitworth, who was playing at an unbelievably high level for his age, was a big one. And definitely the fact that they lost their starting right guard is an interesting thing to look at as well. But I think overall, they're a pretty similar unit. I mean, Noteboom filled in pretty well for Whitworth. David Edwards was a pretty solid starter. Same thing with Brian Allen. But then looking at right guard, that's just a different story. Just trying to figure out who's going to start there and be the next guy.
Yeah, I agree. It's a unit that as of now, it took a step back, but that can be proven, wrong or proven differently. Like once we get on the field and see, I think Noteboom's going to be just fine at left tackle. You can't replace what Whit does as a mentor and a coaching stalwart and just how good he is technicianally wise. But I think Noteboom did prove he could at least take that role. And then, the big question is at right guard, who steps in there. But I love Logan Bruss. I know the Rams were extremely excited about him. Even talked about something came out that they talked about trading up to go get him. That's how highly they were on him, which means I think they think he's going to start this year. And we'll see how Kevin Colbert in year 2 as the offensive line coach really develops him and the rest of that unit to keep that cohesive thing going. So let's now move to the division, Nikko, and take a look at how things stack up. Let's start with the Cardinals, and I'm kind of just going to list units and toss it to you, see how you think it compares to the Rams unit that we just went over. I'll counter, and then we'll move on. So it won't be too crazy in depth, but at least we can give some analysis on how the Rams unit compares. And I know they don't play each other. It's not like the safeties play the safeties, but at least we can kind of do it almost like a Madden competition of like per unit. So kind of starting exactly where we started with the Rams, let's look at the Cardinals secondary, where they have Byron Murphy and Marco Wilson currently slated as their starting corners, with Jalen Thompson and Budda Baker as their safeties. Nikko, how do you like the Rams stacking up against that unit?
I think that Budda Baker is definitely one of the top safeties in the league. So I would give Budda Baker the nod over Taylor Rapp or even Jordan Fuller. That's for starters. Byron Murphy and Marco Wilson, I know that their secondary was a little bit underrated last year, but I wouldn't say it's better than the Rams with Jalen Ramsey and Troy Hill.
Yeah, it's it's kind of becomes as a 4-group lead, Budda Baker versus Jalen Ramsey. If we had to just pick a unit, I'd probably still take the Rams unit, having Jalen Ramsey as one of the best corners in the game. But I mean, Budda is one of the best safeties in the game, but I just think Jalen's impact is a little bigger. And the drop off after Jalen to Jordan Fuller to Nick Scott to Troy Hill is not as deep, I think, as what it goes to, Jalen Thompson, Marco Wilson, Brian Murphy, who is, had some good stuff in their own right. So I think it's close, but I'd probably lean Rams, basically just Jalen Ramsey kind of putting them over the top for that unit. Now looking at the linebackers, and they run a 3-4 base, but a different style than what the Rams do. But we'll look at their 4 backers. I mean, how do we want to compare this? So we'll just go their inside backers, and I'm trying to see how we can exactly compare this. Let's see here, right? Yeah. Okay, so we'll just compare their edge backers to the Rams' kind of edge rushers, and so on and so forth. So inside backers, you have Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons, Isaiah Simmons, former, I believe, 7th overall pick right after Justin Herbert. In just the 2 years ago draft, Zaven Collins, they were able to pick up. I think he's a very strong, starter. How do you like those two comparing to Ernest Jones and Bobby Wagner?
Yeah, I'm not entirely familiar. I know I heard that Isaiah Simmons has struggled a little bit since his rookie year. So I would definitely take the Rams linebackers over the Cardinals, just also because I'm not entirely familiar with how much, they play.
Yeah, it's an interesting unit. And when was the last time we ever have said we'll take the Rams inside backers over someone else? It's been a kind of a unit of weakness that has worked out for the Rams, but definitely hasn't been their strength. And now we've turned into a strength. I mean, Bobby Wagner, one of the best in the game, and Ernest Jones, one of the bright young stars in it. Isaiah Simmons has, I think, struggled in a sense that he came in as first being such a high draft pick, and second, so athletically gifted, but was kind of like a tweener, like in between a little bit of the true backer or more of a box safety type. And so it's almost like they've moved him around until they kind of found this spot for him, which I think he started to develop nicely. So I think Simmons is going to be a really good backer in the league. Zaven Collins, I think, is very good. So I think the unit actually is very, very solid. But, Bobby Wagner, you always got to lean towards him with what he's done in the league so far. So I would lean Rams on that unit as well. And then you look at their outside edge guys. You got Marcus Golden, who is a very good star. They have Devon Kennard as a backup there. I think he ends up probably starting more, but you also have Dennis Gardick as well on the outside. So kind of, whoever you truly think would start there, obviously, versus kind of in a similar situation. Leonard Floyd is the obvious one, but then it's kind of like, all right, is it going to be Justin Hollins? Is it going to be, Garrett? Is it going to be Terrell Lewis? So how do you like the Rams stacking up against kind of that 3-man rotation for the Cardinals?
Yeah, I think I got to give it to the Rams again, even though that might just sound really biased. I know that I've watched Marcus Golden, but I think that unit definitely will miss Chandler Jones.
Yeah, that's a huge loss for them that you can't really – it's similar to like the Von Miller loss, right? So I guess you can really look at which loss will have bigger impact. Is it the Von Miller loss to the Rams, who's now being replaced by the combination of Justin Hollins and Chris Garrett and Terrell Lewis, or is it the Chandler Jones loss that is now, in a sense, being replaced by Dennis Gardick and Devon Kennard? So I think it's for me right now, I'm putting it pretty even. In terms of pure pass rush, I would take Marcus Golden over Leonard Floyd. I think Leonard Floyd does other things better in terms of run defense. He can also cover fairly well with how long and rangy he is. But in terms of pure pass rush, I think Golden's a better pure pass rusher. And I'd probably take Devon Kennard over, former USC guy, actually, over some of the depth the Rams have. But I think it's close. I think the Rams can prove long-term if we see more out of those guys, but we just got to see it first. So I'll lean a little bit Cardinals, I guess, for the first time, so we don't sound completely biased. But now going to the defensive line, J.J. Watt at left defensive end, Rashard Lawrence, and Zach Allen. What's your thoughts, Nikko, on this for the first Rams?
Yeah, I mean, you got one of the best in the game with J.J. Watt. The only problem with him is obviously the health concerns, but from the time that I watched him play on the Cardinals, he still got it in some sense. But I think the biggest thing for him is just staying healthy, and I think that hopefully he can do that this season.
Yeah, I mean, J.J. Watt's going to be a Hall of Famer. No question about it. What he means to that defense when healthy. The health is always a concern, but even when healthy, I'm still taking Aaron Donald over J.J. Watt. So, and then I would say take, Greg Robinson and A'Shawn Robinson, or Greg Gaines, and A'Shawn Robinson over, the Cardinals guys there. So as a unit, for sure, I'm going Rams on this one. Moving over to the offense, let's start with the offensive line. DJ Humphries at left, Justin Puig at left guard, Rodney Hudson at center. They signed Will Hernandez from the Giants for right guard and Kelvin Beachum at right tackle. Some bigger names, but some older names. Thoughts on this unit, which has been fairly weak over the past few years for the Cardinals, but how do you compare that against the Rams right now?
Yeah, I think I got to go Rams on this one. I know Rodney Hudson is really good from the Raiders, I believe. And Will Hernandez was actually a guy that I wanted the Rams to sign for pretty cheap because I know he didn't have the best time in New York, but he's a guy that I thought could possibly have a career resurgence similar to how Austin Corbett did in LA. So
yeah, I agree. I really liked Will Hernandez out of UTEP, and just, nothing worked under the last Giants regime, so I don't want to put too much blame on him. I think he'll have a really bright future with the Cardinals here. But I know the Rams, obviously, we talked about continuity and losing two pieces, but I think they still have more continuity than what the Cardinals had, who kind of shuffled a lot of things. And so it's so much with the offensive line is not just talent, it's continuity and kind of knowing exactly what your counterpart is going to do, which way they're going to dip, way they're going to, block certain ways and how they do checks and calls. And the Rams, I think, have more familiarity with that. So I'll take that unit on that as well. Tight end, Zach Ertz, and also drafted Trey McBride out of Colorado State, plus Max Williams, and they signed Steven Anderson away from the Chargers, who's a very good blocking and kind of out of the backfield type fullback tight end. How do you compare that with what we talked about with the Rams?
Yeah, I think this is the first one I'm going to go Cardinals. And you got Zach Ertz, Super Bowl champion, probably one of the best tight ends in recent memory. And they just drafted the best tight end prospect according to most rankings. So I think they're pretty stacked at tight end.
Yep. Yeah, I'll go tight end too. Zach Ertz, especially if he can be utilized correctly in the offense. Dude still has a ton in the tank. I thought that was a great trade when they were able to get him. And then Trey McBride, who has, like you said, probably the best prospect in the draft, and has such a bright future and the full repertoire when it comes to playing the tight end position. So I agree with you. We'll go with Cardinals there. So I think I have it scored right now. Cardinals have 2 total position takings. Receiver, for now, we got to count Hopkins out because he's suspended for, is it 6 games or 8 games he's suspended for?
I believe it was 6 games.
First 6 games. So, I mean, I guess we'll include him because come playoffs, he would be back. So, yeah, let's include him. So, essentially, you got DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Brown, who they traded for, and AJ Green. So, those are your big 3 there, which is actually a pretty damn solid unit. How do you like that going up against the big 3 in LA?
Yeah, I think you can't really beat Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson, but this is still a pretty good unit. You got Marquise Brown, DeAndre Hopkins is a really good 1 and 2. I know AJ Green had a pretty good season for them last year, and then they have Rondale Moore, who I know they want to be that kind of gadget guy in their offense.
Yeah, it's an interesting unit because there's definitely a lot of talent there. You have the name power, right, with AJ Green, who is, more of a complimentary role at this point. DeAndre Hopkins is still really, really good, but I think he's kind of fallen off that pedestal of being the number 1 receiver, which he was for many years with the Texans. And I think part of that, him and Kyler just needs to get more on the same page. But Cooper Kupp is, the reigning, in my opinion, MVP. He, the Triple Crown winner, the best receiver in football. Allen Robinson, I think, is literally going to just unleash this year with the Rams and be so good. I think people are going to realize just how damn good he is. He just hasn't had a quarterback throwing him the football. Running back, James Conner, they have Benjamin. They also drafted USC product Keontae Ingram. Kind of, to me, similar to the Rams in the sense that there's going to be a real committee here. So how do you kind of like, which committee do you like better, I guess?
Yeah, I know James Conner. If we were just talking about singular guys, I would say James Conner over any of the Rams running backs. But as a group, I would have to go with the Rams.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Benjamin is a real small, gadgety guy. Keontae Ingram, I think, actually is going to be a good NFL prospect just because he doesn't have a lot of tread on the tires from his time at Texas and USC. But as a well-rounded group, I do like the Rams, and if healthy, obviously. But I'll give the nod to the Cardinals just in the sense that James Conner had like 17 touchdowns last year, and is a very powerful running back who can do a lot of things, can catch the ball in the backfield as well. So I think it's close, and I think it'll be interesting to see how Kyren Williams, his role is right off the bat, if Cam Akers can get back to true form when they drafted him. But as of now, we'll go Connor. So, all right, last one, and we'll do the next teams maybe a little quicker. But quarterbacks, Matthew Stafford, Kyler Murray. I'm still have a bone to pick the fact that Murray was a Pro Bowler and Matt Stafford wasn't. But what's your take on the comparing the two?
Yeah, I think that this one's a pretty easy one. Obviously, you're going to go with the Super Bowl champion, Matthew Stafford. And overall, just their style of play is obviously really different. Kyler, you also have to count his rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, that kind of thing in terms of like if you were to compare total touchdowns. But I think he's got a great future ahead of him. But Matthew Stafford is definitely the better quarterback as of now.
Yeah, Kyler is such a talent. And I think people were worried about his size, and I think he's quieted those people because I think he's been able to do great things. And I'm not, obviously there's been some health issues, but I don't think that's necessarily because of his size. It's just his style of play in general. But you need to see it for a full season, right? And the guy starts off hot every year, and then him and the team as a whole taper off down the stretch. Mentally and leadership wise, I don't like getting into that too much just because we're not in the locker room. All we do is see what people say on Twitter and what people report on. But I think it's not far cry to say it seems like Matthew Stafford's probably a little better in the leadership category than Kyler Murray. I don't think anyone would really argue with that. So that alone, I would lean towards Stafford, but then you just see what Stafford did and how he was able to bounce back in games and how he's able to forget bad weeks and move on to the next. So for me, it's a slam dunk Stafford for now and for the foreseeable future. So I think it's safe to say overall, we like the Rams overall depth chart more than the Cardinals, correct?
Yes.
So, okay, cool. So there we go. Finishing above the Cardinals. Moving on to the Seahawks, which I think this one we can go quick because it should be pretty easy with the overturn that's happened in Seattle. Let's go to the secondary quick. Artie Burns, Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, and Sidney Jones is actually a decent unit. How do you like it against the Rams?
In terms of experience, I would probably have to go with the Seahawks unit because you got Jamal Adams, former All-Pro, hasn't really been able to put it together in Seattle so far yet. I know people like to criticize his coverage ability, but that's not really what he does as a safety. And I think if they're able to use him correctly, he can have a much better time there than he has so far. Quandre Diggs, I know he picked off Matthew Stafford a couple of times last year. Really good safety. One of the underrated safeties, I think, in my opinion. And Sidney Jones and Artie Burns are a little bit shaky in terms of, like, I know Artie Burns is a veteran corner. Same thing with Sidney Jones, but it'll be interesting to see how they perform this year.
Yeah, it's not a bad unit, but it leaves some to be desired, I guess. Adams, you give up 2 first-round picks for a blitzing box safety. That's a whole nother story. But Diggs, I think, is a very quality safety, and Jones and Burns are solid corners. Nothing's going to be in the same conversation as Jalen Ramsey, but you might take them over, the Rams CB2. But as a unit, I think what the Rams are able to do, I just like a little better. I do love the Kobe Bryant draft pick. Still think one of the Rams or Chargers should have taken him. It just was sitting there for the pick-in for them to take Kobe Bryant here in LA, but I think he's a really good player. They played alongside Sauce Gardner at Cincinnati, and he could end up becoming the starter, I think, early on. I think that's how talented he is. He just didn't get the love because he played on the other side of Sauce Gardner. So a lot of good stuff there, but I'll lean Rams just because of the Jalen Ramsey factor again. Inside backers, and the Seahawks run a 4-3 base, so it'll be a little different comparison, but your inside backer, Jordan Brooks, versus the likes of Wagner, who the former Seahawk, and Ernest Jones. I don't think we have to spend too much time on it, but I'm assuming you would take the Rams unit over that.
Yeah, I think that Jordan Brooks, I know he hasn't had the best of careers so far in Seattle. I know they were disappointed by his first couple of years, but he's really kind of picked it up past season or so. And I think that the Rams obviously have a better unit.
Yeah, and I guess we can clump since they run a 4-3. Cody Barton's their weak side backer. Joel Ili Bounier, I know I'm saying that wrong, is their strong side, with also Ben Burr-Kirven, who I like a lot out of Washington, rotating in there. So as a 4-3 base unit versus our 3-4 inside package, I like our 3-4 much better. We'll just move on quickly, and you go to we'll just clump in the defensive line and the edge all as one unit. So now you include Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd, all those guys going up against Darrell Taylor out of Tennessee. I actually liked that draft pick last year a lot. Didn't see a ton of production on him last year, but that's a very high talent. Poona Ford at the tackle position, Quentin Jefferson at the other tackle, and then former Trojan, former Charger Uchenna Nwosu as their other edge rusher. How do you like that unit in comparison to the Rams?
Yeah, obviously, I don't think I don't think either the Cardinals or the Seahawks are going to have a better defensive unit than the Rams. But I think this defensive line rotation is a better rotation than the Cardinals. You also got L.J. Collier and Shelby Harris from the Russell Wilson trade, and those are some pretty good defensive linemen, I would say.
Yeah, Shelby Harris is very underrated. He'll probably end up being more the starter there if things go well, as he was in Denver. So what he brings is just the ability to, swat the ball down, and he's just gobbles up the run. So I think Shelby Harris is a great addition there. So I think definitely an upgrade over what the Cardinals have. But you still Leonard Floyd, Aaron Donald, I'm still leaning Rams overall. But this is the one unit I think they did improve. And obviously you would hope so when you trade your quarterback and get a slew of players and draft picks. But I think the signing of Uchenna Nwosu also was a very good one. So much better unit, but we'll still go Rams. Offense, let's go offensive line. Love the Charles Cross pick who they able to get out of Mississippi State, who should be their starting left tackle. Then they got Damian Lewis at left guard, Kyle Fuller at center, Gabe Jackson, formerly of the Raiders, at right guard, and Jake Curran at right tackle. Definitely a unit that has been not good almost all of Russell Wilson's career. That's kind of, I think, why the trade talks began. It was something they just never really addressed, keeping him protected. They finally did this year in getting Charles Cross, but a little too late. They also signed Austin Blythe that many Rams fans will remember. And they also drafted Abraham Lucas later in the round. So I think they're building something good. I just don't think they're there yet. But your thoughts on the unit?
Yeah, I think that, like you said, that's been one of the Seahawks' weaknesses, Russell Wilson's almost entire career, which is kind of why he had to be more improvise more as his career went on. I think that that's a weakness that the Rams were able to exploit very, very well.
Yes.
But I think that this is another young group where you got like Damian Lewis. I know he was last year or 2 years ago, and he was pretty solid. I know the Charles Cross pick was really good, and Austin Blythe might end up starting somewhere on their line if injuries happen.
Yeah, so I think it's a unit that they're finally correcting and building, and it has a bright future. I mean, just the fact that Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas were two slam dunk draft picks, and we'll see how those play out though as rookies. So, but yeah, I'll still lean Rams because of, like we said with the Cardinals, the continuity, the depth they have, the knowledge they have with each other. Not as much overturn. There's not, other than potentially Bruss, there's not, two starting rookie tackles. So we'll go Rams, but the Seahawks are building something. So touche there. Finally, took you a little too long.
Just a little too late.
Yeah, lost your All-Pro quarterback. Tight end position, I think, is another one that they're building nicely. It's a position they use a lot in their offense. They got Noah Fant in the Russell Wilson trade, who has extreme talent at tight end. Unfortunately, in that Denver archaic offense, with the lack of quarterback play and with just the poor play calling from Pat Shurmur, he was just never really his skill set was never used correctly. And now I think he can be in Seattle and can be actually very, very good. And then Will Dissly, we've seen when healthy what he can be, and Noah Fant's just a 2 times better athlete than Will Dissly. So I'll just start. I actually would probably lean towards this unit. There's unknown, whereas at least we know what Tyler Higbee is. But I think the fact that Fant, a former top 20 overall pick, with the talent, the speed he has, the ceiling that he has, is so great that I'll lean to the Seahawks at the tight end. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I would lean towards the Seahawks at tight end as well. Not maybe as much of a lean, but definitely a lean for Noah Fant and Will Dissly. I know you mentioned about bad quarterback play coming from Denver, but then he's also going to be reunited with the same quarterback that was throwing him the ball before. So I'm not entirely sure if he'll do much better than before.
Yeah.
But I know that the Seahawks are probably an offense that will use a tight end more than Denver did.
Yeah, I know it's. I don't know if it's funny or if they like it. I know they, going into this year, they had created, at least the talk was in training camp, they had created some good chemistry. They were drafted in the same draft class.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're buddies. I don't think there's any malcontent or anything like that. And I'm not going to sit here and say Drew Lock is, a quarterback just waiting to be unleashed. But I think that offense just did not suit what Noah Fant can do. Because I think Drew Lock can get him the football. It wasn't like he couldn't get it to him, but it's just he was used on so many short intermediate routes and was asked to break tackles when he's a burner tight end that, put him in the seam, use him in the seam and the deep play. When we saw their rookie season together, when Locke played those last 4 games, and Fant had some of the best games of his career, and that was his rookie year, and that was Locke's rookie year, and they both had some of their best games that season when they were kind of just letting it go out there and fly. So we could see a little bit more of that. Receivers, I think Rams are going to take it on in the entire division, but we can at least talk about it. Tyler Lockett, still to this day, one of the most underrated receivers in the game. But again, we'll see how that changes with now Drew Lock from the football instead of Russell Wilson. DK Metcalf and Freddie Swain are your most likely starters. D. Eskridge also taken last year, who didn't get much production, but we could see an uptick there. I know which way you'll lean, but what's just your thoughts overall on the Seahawks receiving room?
Yeah, I think, like you said, again, another really solid unit. DK and Tyler are a pretty good duo. I know that Tyler Lockett might definitely suffer as a result of the Russell Wilson trade, because I know they were one of the connections. I remember correctly, like passer rating when targeted, like him and Lockett were one of the top in the league. Yeah. And I know that him losing Wilson is going to be definitely big, but we'll see how it turns out with Locke. I know DK Metcalf, there was rumors that he might be traded, but as of right now, he's still in Seattle. So I think that they've got a really good duo. I'm not really sure about a trio.
Yeah, it's, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, Nikko, because I've said it a lot. I played receiver in high school, not well, but I did play it. And you know, we always, you know, not saying me and you, but just in general, fans and media, you know, we talk about these receivers and, you know, rank them and prop them up, but receiver and rightfully so. And there's some amazing receivers out there, obviously, but receiver, unlike really every other position, is so contingent on another position. Like you can be talking about Allen Robinson, you can be a great receiver that no one ever discovers if you have horrible quarterback play or horrible play calling. And we will truly see this year in a number of instances how good Tyreek Hill truly is being now in Miami, how good Devontae Adams truly is now being with the Raiders and not having Aaron Rodgers, how truly good DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are not having Russell Wilson. We all know how athletic they are. We all know that they can catch the ball, they can run the routes, they can outrun people. But are we going to see DK go from 1,400 yards to 700 like that just because of the quarterback change? So your thoughts overall on just kind of receivers and how and we can even talk about the Rams. I mean, Cooper Kupp, who I think is the best receiver in football, but it was obvious the shift going from Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford. So just your thoughts overall on the receiver conversation. I'm just interested because I kind of talk about that a lot I love receivers, but again, we see these receivers that just got huge paydays where if their quarterback isn't up to snuff, you're paying a receiver $30 million to get 800 yards receiving.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned with Cooper Kupp, you saw he had a pretty good 2019. I know he was one of the top guys in 2019, but I think as the offense overall just started to decline with Goff, that he kind of went with it. I'm just looking it up here: 1,161 yards, 10 touchdowns. That's a pretty good receiver season. And then, just like you said about Devontae and Tyreek Hill, those are guys that have had Hall of Famers at quarterback their entire career. And when you remove them from those great situations, I mean, Devontae was like one of the main targets of the Green Bay offense. And similar to Tyreek Hill, but he was also sharing time with Travis Kelce. They were pretty much the focal points of those offenses. And now they get to join an offense where, you know, they're not necessarily the main target. I mean, you got Devontae in Las Vegas with Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow. And similar to Miami, where you got Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki. So it'll be interesting to see how these quarterbacks, you know, throw to those receivers that have had most of the targets their entire careers.
Yeah, and not to mention Tua Tagovailoa throwing up punts to Tyreek Hill, so he might be waiting on some passes there where he wasn't with Patrick Mahomes. So, no, I've said it many times. So for those listening, sorry for the repeat, but it's just interesting. If you go down and you look at like the greatest 25 receivers of all time, it's rare that you find one that had even mediocre quarterback play. I mean, the greatest receiver of all time, no one would argue, is Jerry Rice. He had Joe Montana and Steve Young his entire career pretty much until he had a few stints with the Raiders and Broncos and Seahawks down the line. So even you could maybe make the argument that Randy Moss for most of his career had the duo of Randall Cunningham and Dante Culpepper. That's probably the closest we have to a mediocrity. But then he went to Tom Brady after that. And so it's just, yeah, it's interesting the discussion around receivers and the value that they truly bring, which I'm not arguing how good some of these guys are, but I mean, the value can't be as good if the quarterback's not as good getting the ball. So anyway, that's a huge diatribe and digression from the comparison. I think we both agree that the Rams overall are better. Running backs, interesting group. Also can't really stay healthy. Rashad Penny, former first round pick. They took Kenneth Walker this year out of Michigan State, who I love Kenneth Walker. I don't love in this situation. They also have Chris Carson, who is, I would say, is probably the incumbent starter. And then DJ Dallas, who had some flashes last year. Again, probably another running back by committee, which is almost every NFL team doing nowadays. So which committee do you like better?
Yeah, I'm going to have to give this one to the Seahawks. I mean, even before, you know, they drafted Kenneth Walker, they had a pretty good 1-2 with Chris Carson and Rashad Penny. And Chris Carson's a pretty good running back. He's underrated definitely by many. I think he does a lot of things well. Not one thing extremely well, but he's very well-rounded overall. So I got to give this one to the Seahawks.
Yeah, you know, it's units that are very similar because it's not like they all can't stay healthy. Chris Carson seems to always get banged up. Rashad Penny has had his share of injuries. But Kenneth Walker, who was a stud out of Michigan State, they add to that room. We'll see if he kind of ends up becoming the starter or not. And just because with the Rams, who I love, Kyron Williams, I mean, it's very close. It's very close. But I think the style of offense they play, I would agree. I'd lean a little Seahawks, but it's kind of like, who are you a fan of more? in that regard, in my opinion. So quarterback, let's not even talk about. We know Stafford over Locke. Moving on or Geno Smith if Geno Smith beats out Locke, but I think Locke's the expected starter there.
Yeah.
All right. Saved it for the hated. I mean, they're all rivals. They're all in the division, but saved the last for the Niners, who have had an interesting offseason. First of all, let me get your take on this, Nikko. What's your thoughts on the fact that Jimmy G's still in house?
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot on just like Twitter and stuff that they've actually preferred Jimmy G over Trey Lance, which that just really baffles me. Like for the fact that they traded so many first round picks to go up and get Trey Lance, and then that they weren't even impressed with him in like training camp and stuff is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, again, who knows how much truth there is to that, but I've been hearing that too, that he just has not taken that step yet. Again, this is all just hearsay on Twitter. I'm not talking directly from the mouth of Shanahan or John Lynch, but yeah, it's an interesting thing. And they kind of, have screwed themselves now to where if they wanted to trade Jimmy G, there's really not not only is there not really a market, but the market is so soft that they're going to get so little back in return. Whereas had they traded him, whether it be last year, I know they were Super Bowl hopefuls. I mean, they went all the way to the NFC Championship game. They could have potentially gotten a first, second, or third round pick if they traded him directly after that, potentially too. But now now him having the surgery, now every team kind of having their quarterbacks kind of set up with the movement of Matthew Ryan and Carson Wentz and all the different, and Baker's still an option for trade also, who's younger. So it's interesting. I think they really have, as a Rams fan, I'm glad they've really messed that situation up, and it's interesting to see what they'll actually do at that position.
Yeah, I think that, like you said, that the quarterbacks for the 49ers, like Jimmy G, hasn't really been able to stay healthy the past couple of years, and that's led them to start, like CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins and just some of those guys that like are really questionable. Somehow they still managed to beat the Rams, though, but that's a different story to talk about. But I think that the fact that he hasn't really been able to play an entire season like healthy in a while is interesting.
Yeah. Hey, the Jeff Fisher-led Rams somehow always beat the Legion of Boom Seahawks. So sometimes you just have that number in your division, which is interesting. But hey, the Rams won when it counted last year. So, all right, we'll just start with the offense since we were talking about it. Regardless who plays, I assume you feel this way. I know I do. Stafford over Lance or Jimmy G, right?
Yeah, but here's a question for you. A couple of years ago, we were having this debate. Would you rather have Goff or Jimmy Garoppolo?
We've had that debate too. It's a great question. I would go Goff just because he stays healthy. I mean, Goff, outside of 2020 when he hurt his thumb at the end of the season, he's been healthy his whole career. Last year, healthy too with the Lions. And I think they give you very similar things. They're both very good teammates. Players all seem to really enjoy being around them. They don't shy away from, having to, step up and answer the tough things. Neither is going to take you over the top, but both very similar. It's a good question, but I would go Goff. What about you?
Yeah, I would go Goff. Goff was kind of one of my favorite quarterbacks when I started following the Rams because some of the first games I watched with them were, the Minnesota Vikings game with the perfect passer rating, the Chiefs game, and he was just like tearing it up. And I don't think we've ever seen something from Jimmy Garoppolo that's similar to that.
Yeah, even in some of their biggest wins, it was never because of Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Like when they beat the Rams in week 17 or week 18, whatever, the 17th game, they went into overtime. He had the last drive. Like, I will give him credit for that. But the rest of the game was the running game. When they went to the Super Bowl, I mean, it was the game that, he had like 6 pass attempts against Green Bay because they ran the ball like 42 times. So he was never really one that kind of led the Niners. And again, like I said, I don't think Goff gets you over the top, but there were moments where he truly did lead the Rams. And there were moments when he won games with 400 plus yards passing. One against the Chiefs, you mentioned, against the Vikings in that Bobby Trees YG game. So yeah, I would go Goff, but I'm also, the Niners are the rivals, so you can't ever take the Niners quarterback, right?
Yeah, and then moving on to running back, they've got another committee here, as they always do.
Yep.
And I think that this is another young group. You got Elijah Mitchell, who was a pretty standout guy last year. Jeff Wilson, another one of those rotational guys. JaMychal Hasty and Trey Sermon, they've all pretty much, I would say they're all pretty similar skill sets. I know that any running back in the Shanahan system is going to succeed pretty much. You can't really find a bad running back that runs their offense. But I think overall the Rams have it in terms of just playmaking. And if you were to stick a Rams running back into the 49ers system, they would perform pretty similar, I would think.
Yep. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think purely looking at the player and talent, I would absolutely go Rams. Because in the Niners, just any running back, it's plug and play, right? Like whoever you put in that system is going to be successful. And so that's not taking anything away from the talents of Elijah Mitchell and Jeff Wilson Jr. and whatnot. But I just, from a pure talent and production standpoint, I would go, or not production, but a talent and upside standpoint, I would go with the Rams running back. So wide receivers, you got the Debo at this point. We'll see if he can, and that's another front office issue with the Niners. I mean, is Debo going to be a Niner next year? And Brandon Ayuk, and I guess you would say, I don't know, Juwan Jennings is their wide receiver 3. Maybe Keyshawn Johnson they just took last year. I don't think it really matters either way. I definitely 100% go Rams in this unit. Obviously, Debo's great, but as a pure receiver, I'm still taking Cooper Kupp 10 times out of 10 over Debo as a pure receiver. And then after that, I'm going obviously I'm going with the next 2 on the Rams over anyone else on the Niners roster. So your thoughts though?
Yeah, I think similar to Seattle, this is another good duo, not necessarily good trio, but it's hard to rank. I would say it's pretty hard to rank the wide receiver duos in the NFC West outside of the Rams. Because you got a pretty good duo on each team. You know, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. I know Ayuk didn't have the best of seasons last year, and I think that was variety of different reasons, personnel, or who knows.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely a good talent, and he came on late. He started off extremely slow. I know mainly just because I had buddies who took him in fantasy, and I was like, "What's?" Ayuk's get me 1 catch a game, and then he kind of came on late there. Again, quarterback dependent, the receiver is. So, but yeah, you can't beat I don't know who in the NFL in general can beat the Rams trio as it is. So, tight end. Let's not spend a lot of time on it. I think we're both going George Kittle. Yeah.
Yeah.
We won't talk fullback because the Rams don't really run fullback at all, but Kyle Juszczyk, obviously a great fullback. Offensive line now. This is an interesting comparison. You got Trent Williams, one of the best tackles in the game. Colt McKivitz at left guard. Alex Mack, a great center signing they had a few years ago. Daniel Brunskill and Mike McGlinchey, who they took out of Notre Dame a few years back. Who you taking at offensive line?
Yeah, I think the Rams have a slight edge over the 49ers. I know that Trent Williams is definitely one of the best left tackles in the league. And then you got Mike McGlinchey. Their tackles are really good. But as on the interior of the offensive line, Brunskill and Colton McKivitz, I wouldn't take those guys over the Rams. But I think it's pretty close, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's extremely close. And I will at this point lean, to not be biased, I'll lean Niners strictly for the fact that, Trent Williams is as good as he is, whereas last year I would have leaned Rams because of Andrew Whitworth and as good as he is. But you lose that and you put Noteboom as the full-time starter and you have the question mark at right guard. And so for that reason, I'll lean Niners, but it's extremely close. I think both units are very, very similar, run similar schemes, similar systems. I think the Rams probably have better depth overall. I think they've added well throughout the drafts where they have those pieces that, whether it's Tremaine Ankrum, whether it's Coleman Shelton, whether it's now Logan Brust, whether it's Bobby Evans, you have some good interior depth there. But just purely for the first 5, I'll lean Niners, as painful it is for me to say.
Yeah, I think something else you have to consider is the run blocking versus pass blocking with this team, because obviously they're going to be running a lot more than the Rams are going to be. So I know they pulled Trent Williams. I'm not sure if you saw that video last year, but when they pulled Trent Williams as an offensive lineman, I think I would give him the run blocking for sure.
Yes, that's a great point. Whereas the Rams, I don't think anyone would argue the Rams actually struggled in run blocking. Brian Allen, I think, was very good in pass pro, but not great in run blocking from the center position. And that's definitely a concern somewhat into the season and why maybe we haven't seen the running production we've wanted. But at least they alleviate that by being very, very good in pass pro overall. And, they had some issues in certain games, but overall they were good. But yeah, that's a great point there that in run blocking, the Niners for sure, I think, take the lead in that. So defensively, again, the Niners run a 4-3. So we'll try to let's see how we can compare this as best we can. We'll just go with the entire defensive line and include the edge rusher. So we'll basically do a 4-man Niners defensive line and a 5-man Rams defensive line, and then a 3 linebacker unit versus 2 linebacker unit. So you got D Ford, Javon Kinlaw, Eric Armstead, and Nick Bosa for the Niners. And then obviously everyone knows the Rams with Donald, Leonard Floyd, Ashawn Robinson, Greg Gaines, etc. This is close. Where are you leaning?
I'm not sure. Like you said earlier, I don't think any really defensive line can challenge the Rams, but this one is a close second.
Yeah.
I know that D Ford and Dre Greenlaw, I think I'm seeing here, are the kind of outside guys. And I know that Javon Kinlaw hasn't really lived up to the expectations of DeForest Buckner. If you throw DeForest Buckner back in here, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But I know that Eric Armstead and Nick Bosa are really good defensive linemen, but I don't think they're on the same level as Aaron Donald and the rest of those guys there.
Yeah, let's do it like this, since this is the last team and we're going to wrap up right after this. So if you take the number 1 player on the Niners defensive line versus the number 1 player on the Rams, you would go Donald versus Nick Bosa. And as great as Nick Bosa is, and as good of a pass rusher he is, no one in their right mind is taking him over Aaron Donald. So, okay, 1 for the Rams. And again, it's different because it's a 3-4 base versus a 4-3. But if you look at, we'll go Eric Armstead's probably the next best on that line. Who would you say is the next best on the Rams? Would you go Ashawn Robinson or would you go Greg Gaines?
I would say Greg Gaines because they're both more D tackles. Robinson's more of an edge.
Okay, so yeah, and then in that sense, I love Greg Gaines, but I probably lean Eric Armstead just for the amount of production in his career so far. Greg Gaines, we've only seen really half a season. As great as he played, we go Eric Armstead. Then after that, you'd probably go D Ford, and you could compare D Ford to Leonard Floyd. And in my opinion, similar to what I talked about with Leonard Floyd versus the Cardinals, D Ford might be a better rusher, but I think Leonard Floyd is a better overall player at that position. Your thoughts of those two?
Yeah, D Ford, I know he's pretty famous for having the offsides in the AFC Championship game a couple years ago. That's the first thing that comes to mind when I hear D Ford. But I know that he hasn't really been the same player since he got to San Francisco. But I think that I would probably take Leonard Floyd overall as a player if you're talking about like the whole player instead of just one specific aspect.
So yeah, we're in agreement there. And then you'd probably go Javon Kinlaw versus Ashawn Robinson, which I would 100% take Ashawn Robinson.
Yeah, same here.
So when you break it down like that, I think, we would safely take not safely, I guess it was 3 versus 2, but we would take the Rams unit over the Niners. So there we go. Good way to break it down, but it's close. The Niners have always had a great defensive line. It helps when you draft a top 5 defensive linemen, like 3 out of 5 years, which they've done all the time. I think they did again this year, drafting a high defensive lineman. So they did take Drake Jackson out of USC, who I love. Drake Jackson, I was so bummed, happy for him, but extremely bummed that he went to the Niners because I wanted to see him go elsewhere that I could really cheer for him, which I'm still going to root for him because he's a C guy, excuse me. But yeah, we'll see. I think he'll be in that rotation as well. Who's a very, very, very good prospect. He has the same size, speed, measurables as Kayvon Thibodeau, who's a top 5 pick, and Jackson went in the second round. So, all right, moving to the backers. We got our two Rams in Ernest Jones and Bobby Wagner, and then the Niners. You got Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner in the middle, and Azeez Al-Shaair. How do you compare that unit versus ours?
Yeah, I know. I was always jealous of the Niners linebackers. I know when people ask, like, if you could steal a player from another team in your division, who would it be? Really big Fred Warner guy. I think that he's a great cover linebacker, one of the best in the league. And he's definitely one of the guys I would steal from another division team if we're talking about that. But now it's a little bit harder because, you got Ernest Jones and Bobby Wagner. I would still probably lean Niners on this one because I know Dre Greenlaw is pretty good as well. And same thing with Azeez Al-Shaair.
Yeah, this one, I think, in my opinion, comes down to who are you a fan of? Because I think it's really, you add Bobby Wagner. I mean, you put up Bobby Wagner versus Fred Warner. It's like, okay, Fred Warner's probably the younger guy, but Bobby Wagner is still playing at an elite level. I mean, 170 tackles just a year ago, like unreal. And then, Drake Greenlaw, obviously at this point in his career has done more than Ernest Jones, but I like the ceiling of Ernest Jones. So I'll just call this one a draw. We'll call this an even one because I think it's too close to call. Both are very good units, which again is crazy to say as a Rams fan because it hasn't been a great unit for quite some time. All right, finally, the final unit we will compare. Sorry, Nikko, probably kept you longer than you were planning on when you wanted to come on the show. I don't think you expected to be here for this long, but here we are.
It's all good. I think you're forgetting special teams, though. We haven't gotten through special teams.
Oh, yeah. If we want to make this a 3-hour podcast, we could get into some special team stuff. Secondary, Charvarius Ward, George Odom, Jimmy Ward, and Emmanuel Mosley are your slotted starters for the Niners. You also have Jason Verrett, who they re-signed, who when healthy has done some starting. Talanoa Hufanga from USC has had some spot play as well versus the Rams unit. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, I think like you said earlier, just going back to that Jalen Ramsey effect, obviously you're going to take the Rams as a whole, but I do like Jimmy Ward over Jordan Fuller. I will say that.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure about Charvarius Ward. I know he was decent in Kansas City, but it'll be interesting to see how he performs there. And Jason Verrett, I think I would say would be better than someone like David Long or one of those guys, Robert Rochelle. So it's pretty close on this one for me as well, but I would say lean more towards the Rams because of Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, I agree. I'll lean Rams too. And the thing with Jason Verrett is the dude is so talented. Unfortunately, just can never stay healthy. I mean, he gets hurt every single year. Sucks to say, but when you're ranking units or comparing players, that has to be accounted for if the guy's not on the field. So Jimmy Ward's great. Charvarius Ward has done some good things. But I think the Jalen Ramsey effect and then the idea of Jordan Fuller, Nick Scott, Terrell Burgess, the potential of some of these other guys slotting in and what they've done in the secondary and bringing back Troy Hill really makes that unit a strength when it was kind of a weakness last year. So overall, I would go Rams there as well. So I think going through it all, I wasn't keeping total tallies, but I think we've overall put the Rams, which I don't think anyone would disagree with, at the top of the division, but that includes when you go position by position, player by player. We like the Rams on this roster. Correct?
Yep. I think there's definitely some of them that can challenge them for that. Some positions, like we said, the linebacker on the 49ers and wide receiver on the Arizona Cardinals are close ones, but I think that the Rams obviously came out on top for most of them.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. So, well, there you have it. Everyone listening, let us know. You can hit me up on Twitter at Ryan Dyrud LAFB. You can hit up Nikko at Football by Nikko. Let us know your thoughts on where the Rams rest within the NFC West. Schedule release tomorrow. Let me ask you, we got an article up on LAFB Network kind of asking people who they want to see the Rams play in their home opener, which will be when we raise the banner. Most likely will be the first game of the season for the entire league, I would assume. Who do you want to see him play?
Yeah, I've heard actually that the Bills are probably going to be the number one choice for them there. And I think that's a great way to kick off the season. You got two of the best offenses in the league. And I think you also got two very similar teams. The Bills, they weren't able to put it together 100% last season, losing to the Jags, just really inconsistent, similar to the Rams. They weren't entirely the team that they could have been the whole year. And I think that'll be interesting to kick off the season against, the AFC, almost the AFC champions last year.
Yeah, it'll be such a good game whenever they play them. I always go back and forth in this, Nikko, because part of me is like, let's just get the best game possible for primetime viewers. But then part of me is like, all right, it's the first game of the season. There's still going to be kinks to work out. We're raising the banner. Like, do we want the risk of losing that first game and then people saying like, oh, they're not the same team they were last year? So I go back and forth. I'm like, it would be a great game. I would love it. I would not be upset about it. But part of me kind of wants to start with the Cardinals. And that's not trying to be disrespectful for the Cardinals, but we saw what the Rams did in the wild card round against them. We've won 9 of 10 in the regular season against them over the last 5 years in the Sean McVay era. It's still a division game, so still a fun rivalry. There's still talent on both teams, but I would feel a lot more comfortable with the Rams going out and having a fun game, but getting a win and not losing any of that luster after raising the banner. So I don't know. I go back and forth.
Yeah, I've also seen the rumor that people wanted the Raiders because they started off playing 2018 against the Raiders. And I've also seen the Cowboys because they always seem to like the Cowboys at home.
Yeah. Cowboys would be a fun one too. And this, I hate this even. I always hate this conversation bringing up, but the thing with the Cowboys, you just know there's going to be a ton of Cowboys fans there. So part of me is like, let's just make sure we have a game where it's all Rams fans and we don't have to have conversations on national TV about, oh, look at all these Cowboys fans here in LA. But
yeah,
we shall see. So Nikko, my man, thanks so much for joining me. Hour 15. Appreciate you. Where can everyone find you and all your work at?
Yeah, so I'm covering the Rams, and next year more UCLA football will be coming your way on Football Sapient. Currently, we're doing the Houston Gamblers, all the USFL stuff. You can find me at Football by Nikko on Instagram and Twitter. And yeah, that is it.
Awesome, brother. Well, hey, thank you for joining me. Rams fans, make sure to check him out as he obviously covers our same team. So enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon, all right, brother?
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thank you all for tuning into the LA Football Show. Hope you enjoyed that conversation, a little Rams talk. Always a blast talking anything football. Always appreciate all of you guys for tuning in, listening to me. I do have a quick little announcement. My man, Jamal Madney, he's a co-owner of the LA Football Network. If you listen to any of our other shows, he's been on this show before, but he also helps co-host Draft is in Session and also does some work with our guy Will on Bruin Bible. So he's kind of all over the network, but he's actually going to join me as my new kind of full-time co-host. He's just super knowledgeable, just an awesome human being. And I think he's going to bring a lot of value to this show and give you guys a lot of value to your LA football teams overall, as he knows, the full gamut. So excited for him to join me. That's probably going to happen either this week on Friday, or he'll be out of town for a little bit shortly, and we might just wait till he gets back from that. But excited to announce my man Jamal is going to be joining me as a regular co-host on this show as we kind of encapsulate the LA Football Network and what the LA Football Network's all about. So last thing before we sign off, haven't mentioned in a while, but if you're a whiskey fan, my guy, Coach Jason Brown, has his own whiskey. It's called Slapdick Whiskey. If you go to CoachJBStore.com, use the promo code SlapdickLA, 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 you're going to get a nice percentage off of any bottle you buy. Slapdick whiskey is delicious. Like I said, I'm a big whiskey fan. If you listen to the show, you know that. But you can head to CoachJBStore.com, use the promo code SlapdickLA, get yourself a bottle. It can ship to anywhere you are. Don't even have to leave your house, and you're going to get whiskey delivered right to you. So make sure to check that out. This is the LA Football Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back on Friday talking all things LA football, having a lot of fun. Appreciate you all. Enjoy these next 2 days. Talk to you in a few. I'm out. Peace.